Imagine meeting someone who wanted to learn about your past, not to punish you or to judge you, but to understand you better so they know how best to love you. That's where I am now, but that's not where my story begins. My story begins as a 7-year-old girl, and I'm going to share my journey of what love has meant to me since that time 30 years ago. It seems like only yesterday. So Colin was my first innocent love. I met him at the age of 7. We'd just moved to Christchurch and we were part of the Baha'i community, so we were very involved in going to lots of events, and we met the Abrams family. They were a beautiful big family of 6 children, and 3 were adopted, 3 biological. And they lived up in the Kashmir Hills in this, what I thought was the biggest mansion I'd ever seen in my life. And one of those children was Colin. And we were about the same age, and sparks right from the start. We just got on so well. And I thought, this is it, I've got it sorted. I found this lovely boy, and we're going to just start. This is my fairy tale. This is what you're meant to do. I've met him. We're going to get married. We're going to live happily ever after. Yeah. So I remember weddings. Because we had a lot of Baha'i weddings in the community, and we'd all come together and have big potluck weddings. They were great because everybody came, and that whole night was spent. Our siblings and friends would negotiate between us. And by the end of the night, finally, we actually walked shyly towards each other, put our hands up on shoulder and around the waist, did a slow dance around the room to a love song. So I thought this was it. I'd made it. Unfortunately, I moved a couple of years later, but I didn't stop dreaming about him, because already my idea of love was a bit of a fantasy. It was all in my own head, and I didn't really share that with anybody. And so I went away, and I came back for a holiday. I was so excited to see him, and I'd used all my money to buy this silver bracelet. I got his name engraved on it. It was, pretty impressive. And I met him, and he said, "You're different. You've changed." And I was like, what do you mean? I was heartbroken. He didn't really want to know me anymore. And so at that point, that was when I internalized it. I had no idea the struggle he was going through with his own sexuality at the time, which was just emerging and didn't involve women. I took that all on board inside, not knowing that, and blamed myself and thought that was the first time I felt not good enough. One of those negative self-beliefs that can take over your life right at that young age. So we didn't really make contact again after that. From there, I was in my intermediate years, and they are all fraught with all sorts of things. I fell in love with multiple boys over short periods of time, long periods of time. And my idea of love was still the same, the happily ever after magic story, but had evolved to include physical characteristics. So you were looking for the cute boy at that stage. And I was so shy. Oh my gosh, I was the shyest girl. So I would never have told anybody that I was interested in them. So I lived in my own little fantasy bubble, and I wrote poetry, and I had a journal, and I had stickers and love hearts and glitter and all this stuff. But it was all in my head. I would never tell anyone. I played matchmaker for all the other kids in the class. And I went through those whole 2 years never, ever suggesting I was interested in anything. The end-of-year pool party at Rochelle's house, everyone in the whole class had a turn at going into the pool shed and kissing someone except for me. I was terrified. So once again, my plan for meeting someone and happily ever after hadn't worked out and how it had in my head. Next was Aidan. Aidan, he ended up being my step-cousin. We met in Invercargill at the Tayester Motel in Tay Street, and my family was meeting his family because my mum was getting remarried, so we went down for Christmas, and I walked into the games room at the bottom of the motel, and there was a pool table and ping pong, and there were two boys playing down there, and they were Aidan and Shay. And Aidan, wow, he was like my dream new kids on the block. Like, he's blonde and blue-eyed and dimples and charming and had the southern drawl where he had rolled the R's, you know. I just fell head over feet from the start. And we spent a lot of time playing ping pong and pool and sitting in the spa pool and getting to know each other. But I lived in Christchurch and he lived in Invercargill. So that was a very long-term love letter type relationship. We sent letters back and forth over the years, occasional phone calls because they cost a bomb back in the day. And I looked forward to seeing each other again on the rare occasions that we did. But a very sad thing happened to both Aidan and Shay, and that was the loss of their mother at a very young age. And so those happy, joyful, cheeky boys went from exactly that to sad and angry and lost. And I didn't see them for a little while after it had happened. And when I did see them, I could see immediately the change in them. Aidan came to stay with us in our family, and he happened upon my diary, and he read my diary. He was the first to do it, but there's been many since. And he read about my fantasy love for another boy, and he was angry with me. He was so angry. He was wild. And he locked me out of the house for hours, actually. And my mum found out and realised and finally let me back in. But after that, things were never the same. And so my fantasy of, I was like, I was sure I had this sorted, because this time he actually reciprocated. I actually told, like, we liked each other openly. So I thought I had it sorted this time. But no, I didn't have it sorted. And we didn't really speak to each other again much after that. But that story has an even more tragic ending, because I talked before about how those boys lost their mum. Nobody understood the gravity of what that was going to mean for those boys. And both of them chose to end their lives within 3 months of each other. Shay, the little one, first, overseas, and his brother was there with him when he did it. And then Aidan came home and ended his life 3 months later. The grief of that was a big shock for me, and it left me reeling for a long time, because he was the first love that reciprocated, and now he was gone. There was no hope of reuniting, even though that was all in my head. After that, I didn't really want to talk to boys very much. not for a long time. And I went to an all-girls school, so that helped. But I got a job at KFC on Princess Street, and on my way to Princess Street to work after school, I would stop in at the BP and usually grab a 10-pack of smokes, which was illegal, just saying, and an energy drink of some kind. And one of the young guys that worked there, Aaron, one day he said to me, "Hey, do you want to come and drive in my car?" And I went, "Okay." It was a Datsun 140Y, and he was I know. It was pretty cool. It had side drafts, it had a full body kit on it, it had big wheels, it was dropped on its ass. It was a pretty nice car. And he took me for a ride in that car, and I tell you, we became the best of friends so fast. We were never really destined to be a romantic partnership, but that's kind of what society told us that we needed to be if one was a boy and one was a girl. So that's kind of what we became. And we had a wild time. I mean, I was 16. And so our relationship was just fun. We just had a really good time. But deep down inside, I hoped that when we grew up, that he would change and things would be different, and all of a sudden he'd want to marry me and have children and live happily ever after, because that's how it works, isn't it? Yeah. But during those younger days, there was a lot of disconnect, and I say we had more of a friendship rather than a romantic connection, but we did actually have a sexual relationship, even at quite a young age. And in my head, I didn't realise how careful you needed to be to make sure that you didn't end up pregnant. And I did, at quite a young age. And so, even though it was unplanned and unexpected, and there was a lot of tears, underneath it all, I thought, maybe this will just speed up that whole love story thing. Maybe if I have this little baby, all my dreams will come true. But that wasn't to be. That wasn't to be for us. And not long after that, I found myself driving up Porkchop Hill in the Datsun with Aaron, and we walked out over to the cliffside so that we could overlook the Manawatu River, and we sat for a while, and we buried our baby girl up there. And her name was Awhiranga Ahere. I've never shared that with anybody in my life. After that point, we couldn't come back from that. We tried. We stayed together for quite a number of years after that. And then I got to the 20s, I got to that age where I was like, right, this is my time now. I can get married and have children, live happily ever after. Tick. And he said, no, I don't want that. Once again, heartbroken. All those negative self-beliefs of, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, I'm not deserving of good things or of love. All of those were laid on. So I packed my bags and I walked away. And that, 7 years we were together, it was a long time. The time that followed that was pretty dark. I spent a lot of time singing to Jamie Cullum and crying when I lived in my little flat on my own. And then I thought, right, I've got to get back on this bandwagon. And at that stage I still thought that love was about finding my other half, finding someone to fill my void, someone to lift me up. And so I gave internet dating a go. On a Saturday when I was at work, and I was supposed to be working, but one of my girlfriends that was working with me, she was on the internet surfing Find Someone, and she's like, oh Jess, come and have a look, come and have a look. So I went over and I had a look, and I was like, yeah, that's cool, but I'm not keen. But then I got home that night when I was by myself, and I messaged Richard, and we came together and had a coffee, and he turned up, and he had 2 different shoes on. He was so nervous. I didn't notice, but he told me afterwards, after he'd gotten over the horror of what he'd done. And so began what I thought was going to be my fairy tale. We dated, then we got engaged on a romantic holiday overseas. We planned the most incredible wedding you could ever imagine, stunning. We had 3 beautiful children, and I was like, I've made it. But then our world started to crumble. The stress of not realising what marriage was going to be and what it was going to bring out in each of us, what it was going to trigger in us. The stress of 3 children in quick succession. The stress of living in a home, although it was beautiful, it was daunting to live there. We both were struggling with our own mental health issues as well. Him with depression, me with crippling anxiety and PTSD. And our worlds fell apart. We we couldn't do this anymore. Well, if we'd fallen out of love, I didn't even know this was possible. I certainly didn't plan for this to happen. So at that point, we both made the decision to part ways. And I spent the next 2 years with a wonderful woman named Nikki, she's a local therapist who specialises in trauma. And we worked through 53 events in my life that shaped who I am today and all those beliefs that I had inside me. And she taught me how to love myself. Not the overconfident I love myself, but really in here and what that really, really meant. It meant caring about what I put into my body, or on my body, the food I ate, the words I spoke to myself internally, whether I listened to my body and did what it needed to do. And I healed from all of that anxiety, from that PTSD. And Nikki said to me one day, when you're ready to meet someone again, what are the values that you're looking for? What are the characteristics that you're looking for in someone? And this was a revelation to me. All my life I had met someone and hoped like heck I ticked their boxes. I'd never considered I might have boxes of my own that needed to be ticked. So I did. I wrote a list, and within 2 weeks I went on 3 dates. The universe certainly provided. And one of those dates was David, who's here with me tonight. And our journey was a very different one because he too was working with Nikki, and he came into the gym where I worked as well. So he had a real true understanding of exactly what I had been through because he was doing it himself. And he was working on his own stuff too. So our getting to know each other and learning to love each other was open and honest and with total trust. And it came from a completely different place. We were both whole people wanting to share love with each other. We weren't broken, we weren't half a person, we didn't have voids. We had really worked on ourselves and realised what we wanted and come together. So it's very, very different. And some days, honestly, we're like bumbling 14-year-olds that either trip over our words or can't get them out at all. And we've both experienced so many firsts that at 37 and 45 years of age we just didn't know could happen. So that's where I am today. Imagine meeting someone that wants to learn about your past, not to judge you or to punish you, but to understand how you need to be loved. I wish I could go back to that 7-year-old girl and kneel down to her and give her a hug and tell her, it's okay, we'll get there in the end. You don't need to worry about the fairy tales because the human tale's much better. Yeah. Thank you.